for life. Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to our second webinar for the Community Digitalization Project. My name is Akona Mabasa, and I'll be facilitating the session this afternoon. Just before we begin, just some housekeeping rules. Kindly note that all of the participants' mics will be muted. That counts for both Zoom and YouTube. Please do feel free to share comments and questions in the comments section, and we'll do our best to answer them during the session. Should we not be able to answer all the questions, these will be answered during the dissemination of the relevant material. All right, let's start this webinar. Our first session for this afternoon will be a formal welcoming by Finmark Trust CEO, Brendan Pierce. Over to you, Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. Thanks, Akona. Welcome, colleagues, partners, friends. I think I can call you friends. I see many people that we've worked with and are friends of Finmark Trust work. Welcome. This is the second webinar that we're running on our community digitization project. We call it ComDigi in the office, just so that we save some time. And so the ComDigi project we're rolling out in Tembisa and in Hammanskraal. And we're very excited to finally show you what the actual interventions are going to be in the two pilot sites. We've spent a long time coming to where we are. We've consulted far and wide, and finally we are ready with the interventions that we are currently rolling out. Just in terms of project partners, this project happens under the auspices of the South African Reserve Bank. So you can call it our big brother or big sister. The key other partner is SECO, the Swiss Secretariat for Economic Development. I think that's right, we call it SECO. And of course, the World Bank is a key partner in this project as well. This project is part of a broader digitization program that we have with SECO and with the South African Reserve Bank. I think just some brief background to the project and to the work. Really it comes from us at Finmark Trust and other partners in Treasury, Reserve Bank, observing over the last, let's say 20 years, the trends with financial inclusion in South Africa and other SADC countries that Finmark Trust works in. And there's a few observations through that period that we have made. That has resulted in this project as well as some other projects that I referred to. I think just one of the key learnings is that financial inclusion on its own, or the way that we conceptualized financial inclusion, has not been contributing in the way that we expected it to, improving people's livelihoods, growing local economies, and we've had to review our view or our definition of financial inclusion, which at the time was more supply side driven, with not a strong enough demand side approach to it. And of course, we've now conceptualized what we're calling financial inclusion 2.0, which is trying to bring financial access closer to people's real lives and to see the extent to which it contributes to people's incomes, their livelihoods, etc. And of course, that means that we need to take a strong view of the kind of financial inclusion products that we talk about. Your bank accounts, your mobile money wallets. The second observation, of course, that leads to that is that to a large extent, South Africans and others in the region are using the bank accounts that we have as mailbox accounts, so we're drawing the money every month and transacting in cash. That's a key trend. It's not unique to South Africa or to the SADC region. I think it's a global phenomenon. And so the question there was about how do we make these instruments more useful to people? The third one, that the observation that happens is that the world is digitization is a big issue, and the contribution that digitization can make to economic growth our observation tells us that there's a digital divide that is happening in South Africa and across the region, and that certain communities are being left behind. Already the world is moved on to AI, and we are still talking about areas where people cannot transact digitally. So poorer areas within South Africa especially are not partaking in the digital dividend that others are doing. So those are the kind of background and what brought us to saying what we need to do is to learn and understand what it's going to take to digitize within especially township areas in South Africa and rural areas where the majority of South Africans live, where you currently cannot transact digitally. What is it going to take for us to improve the situation, turn it around, and how can we make digitization contribute more to local economic development and township economic development? That's really what these pilots are about, and the pilots, the learnings from the pilot are feeding directly into key national government programs. One of them is from the South African Reserve Bank, Project Stimela. The other one is the payment modernization project currently being run by the South African Reserve Bank. We've positioned this project to feed directly, the learnings to feed directly into those initiatives, to ensure that they take into account the demand side approaches, what people need, what people require from, from this development. We also, the clear link is also to the township economic development initiatives run by the city support programs, another important one that we have. The project design, finally, Akona, I'm almost finishing. The project design is meant to ensure that we bring together all different stakeholders interested in the space. So government regulators, the private sector, financial service providers, banks and fintechs, as well as civil society organizations, local government. It provides an opportunity for us to learn together what it's going to take to scale this nationally. And of course, for FINWAC's work, we want to take this kind of work into the SADC region as well. So that's the background. Welcome to the exchange, and we hope this is one of many more sharing opportunities that we will have in the journey of these pilot programs over the next 2 or 3 years. Thank you very much, Akona. I will leave it there.
Thank you, Brendan, for that warm welcome. I will now hand over to Mark Schreiber, representing the World Bank, who will offer some opening remarks before we kick off the session. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Akona. Hi everybody. Also, warm welcome to this second webinar on community digitization to increase digital payments in Tembisa and Hammanskraal on behalf of the World Bank. Let me use this opportunity also thank FINWAC Trust for organizing this important webinar and leading this project, and in particular Lesego, Tumi and Nombusa were also sitting there. Also want to thank DFS Lab for providing their expertise in the research that has been done in this, as well as SECO and G2BX for the financing to make this possible. Another thank you for the policymakers also in the room for leading this process. As Brendan also mentioned, the National Treasury is important here, where they just issued in November of 23 a national financial inclusion policy working towards an inclusive financial sector for all. And recently in the budget review of the National Treasury of February of this year, the community digitization project was explicitly mentioned as an important project there. But the Reserve Bank is of course leading the specific area of digital payments, and the National Payment System Vision of 2025, as well as the digital payment roadmap that was just recently issued in April, is important context for this project. And then we have other partners there as well. the Conduct Authority from a consumer protection and inclusion perspective, the IFWG from the innovation perspective, the DSBD, the SASA, and of course the city of Tembisa and Hammanskraal. I also want to thank the financial service providers for sharing an interest in this, showing an interest in this project and sharing their knowledge and experience in here. And the meetings that we had with them also showed an implicit support for that we definitely want to capitalize going forward. But a special welcome, I would say, is for the people of Tembisa and Hammanskraal for we actually developing this pilot. So we are very excited to be part of this important project to increase digital payments. As research has shown that financial inclusion has significant effects for vulnerable people as it increases savings and consumption as well as productive investment of entrepreneurs. And this contributes to improving the livelihoods and the living standards of people. So for us, it's a very, very important project as digital payments is often seen as the first step, but not easy step in increasing financial inclusion. We've seen in the work and the partnership with Finmark Trust and DFS Lab that there are different building blocks that need to be taken into account. Let me mention a few. You have account ownership. It matters whether it's a bank account or a non-bank account, whether you're a South African national or you're a migrant. There are different payment instruments that you could apply, whether it's cardless, or a QR code. There are different payment devices needed, like it's a point of sale terminal or a phone. And of course, you need to have good understanding and trust, reasonable cost when applying it, not being too high, and an enabling infrastructure, whether it's having internet coverage, electricity, as well as enabling or conducive regulation. And it has been seen that in the different use cases, there's a different state of digitization. So this requires a specific approach when you're on the ground trying to digitize the payment environment. So today, Finmark Trust and DFS Lab will share the results of the state of digital payments in Tembisa and Hammanskraal, as well as the observed obstacles for both consumers, merchants, and suppliers, while looking at the whole ecosystem. They will also give you an update on the interventions that are being developed to address these obstacles. And Finmark Trust and DFS Lab did a great job in conducting surveys, interviewing consumers, merchants, and also financial service providers. The World Bank Global team also took lessons from other countries like Egypt, South Korea, or Italy that's shown to be successful in this space by, for instance, increasing the acceptance infrastructure as well as promoting the usage. And as Brendan has said, this sits in a broader program and a broader context where the World Bank together with SECO also conducting the city support program to look at the broader city of Hammanskraal and Tembisa, as well as the financial sector development program. Going forward, this is not a one-off exercise. We see this as a first step, where one, we want to measure the impact of the success of the interventions, as well as learn lessons if the interventions are not successful. Where you could say where we need to evaluate was the intervention that we did effectively executed. That's the first order of learning. The second order is, did we choose the right intervention? Maybe we didn't choose the right intervention, and we need to learn from that. And three is, did we tackle the right problem? Maybe we were focusing on stuff that are actually different on the ground. So those are key questions that will guide us in working towards a model that ultimately increases digital payments, and where we definitely want to scale this to other townships around South Africa in 2025, 2027. Let me conclude by saying that we need all of you here in this room, physically and virtually. That is the people of Hammanskraal and Tembisa in the first place. That's the consumers, the merchants and the suppliers, because we need to understand what is actually helpful and need to listen to you. We need the financial service providers that are providing services or not yet, to also listen and learn from you and involve you in the process, as well as other service providers. And we of course need the policy makers, both local as national, to close the feedback loop and make sure that what we learn is part of the policy environment. I think that only then we can actually make a difference in improving the lives of the people. Let me stop there and thank you all, and enjoy the webinar. Back to you, Akona.
Thank you very much, Mark, for setting the scene for us this afternoon. Maybe just to provide an overview of our agenda and the flow of the session, we will cover the context and positioning of the project. This will be followed by an overview of the project pilot sites, Tembisa and Hammanskraal. We'll then address the barriers and challenges that hinder the adoption of digital payments in the pilot sites, followed by an overview of the interventions that we are proposing aimed at improving digital payments ecosystem in Tembisa and Hammanskraal, which will be the last session that will be followed by our closing. With that said, I'll hand over to Peter Makgetsi from the SARB National Payment System Department, who will contextualize the project and position it for us. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Akona. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Makgetsi. I'm a senior analyst in the Policy and Regulation Division within the National Payment System Department. So I'm going to share a few slides for my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the digital payments roadmap that we launched and published in April 2024. And the aim of that digital payments roadmap is to identify barriers to the adoption and usage of digital payments, and also develop an action plan that will unlock the inclusivity, effectiveness, and sustainability of digital payments in South Africa. And the objective of the digital payments roadmap is to promote and enable the offering and the adoption of alternative, inclusive, cost-effective, sustainable, and innovative digital payments, and to also increase the usage of traditional and emerging digital payments to support socioeconomic needs of all South Africans. And just to add on that, and I think this is what Brendan talked about when he spoke about the payments ecosystem modernization that was established by the SARB early this year. Even though the project started last year, but the establishment of the program started recently. And the digital payments roadmap supports the payment ecosystem modernization, because I think we have received a lot of questions for clarity in terms of how the two projects align. So the digital payments roadmap supports the payment ecosystem modernization. So in terms of where we are with the digital payments roadmap, as I've indicated, that the aim of the the roadmap is to develop an action plan that the stakeholders will implement to make sure that we achieve our objectives in terms of promoting the adoption of digital payments in South Africa. So there is an action plan or implementation plan that we have developed to engage and execute the actions that are in the roadmap. And currently, we are engaging various stakeholders, including Finmark Trust, government departments, the private sector, particularly the payment institutions that offer these payment solutions, so that they can contribute where they can in making sure that we achieve our objectives in terms of promoting the adoption of digital payments in South Africa. So the sub does acknowledge that there are existing initiatives that are out there, whether in the private or public sector. So we will strive to leverage off those activities or initiatives, including the community digitization project that is underway, so that we can effectively execute the actions and avoid duplication of efforts. So for the roadmap to be successful, we acknowledge that we will need collaborations and partnerships from various stakeholders. As you would see in the roadmap, that there are various stakeholders that we identified, and those stakeholders are not necessarily in the payments environment. For instance, stakeholders like your MNOs for their provision of network infrastructures, including those that provide electricity infrastructures, because those are the dependencies for using and adopting digital payments. So yeah, this is my last slide. I don't have a lot of slides because I'm allocated for 10 minutes. But just to highlight the fact that for this project to be successful, we need collaborations and partnerships, as we have partnered and collaborating with Finmark Trust in their community digitization project. I'll pause here and hand over to Akona. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Apologies, colleagues, it seemed we had a technical glitch on our side. Some of the slides were not coinciding with Peter's presentation, but thank you so much, Peter, for that context and project positioning. I'll now hand over to our community coordinators for Tembisa and Hammanskraal to provide an overview of the project pilot sites, Nombuso Kwamanda and Kitumetse Molifi.
Morning, everyone.
Yeah, 1 second. Just seconds.
Okay, my name is Nombuso Kwamanda. I was born and raised in Tembisa. I hold a qualification in entrepreneurship and I'm deeply committed in community development. And as a community coordinator in Tembisa, I lead community mapping. I engage with local leaders and stakeholders. I collect data and engage with local businesses. And I write reports to support the digitization project, all while promoting financial inclusion and aligning our efforts with the community needs. So as an overview, as someone who lives and works in Tembisa, I've experienced the community's dynamics firsthand with over 551,000 residents across the 65 subsections. Tembisa is South Africa's second largest township, mostly home to Black South Africans with a growing immigrant population. Our economic activities, they range from informal businesses to large malls supported by various transport options like railway stations, Harambe buses and taxis. We have a vital social infrastructure, including hospitals, clinics, schools, and community spaces. However, we face significant challenges such as poverty, inequality, high unemployment, poor service delivery, and deteriorating infrastructure, rising crime, and unequal access to housing and services. These issues drive our work to foster a more connected and financially inclusive community. We have selected these two economic nodes, which is Mainline and Tembisa Civic Center, which is Rabasotho, mainly because both of them are very active in terms of the economic and social life in Tembisa. Mainline is a hub with largest taxi rank and well-functioning train station, which is around Okmo, where we also get a lot of taxis where people can move from inside and outside of Tembisa, where people connect for long-distance taxis, and then also making it a major transport center. It is a place where formal and informal businesses thrive, catering to daily commuters with basic goods and services, with a large supermarket, fuel station, access to ATMs from all 5 major banks. It serves as a convenient location for residents to access essential services and exchange to transportation. And then also we went to the Tembisa Civic Center, which is Rabasotho. On the other hand, it's a home for small train station. Also, that's where we find Harambe bus stations, where people get buses to go to work. And then also, that's where the local people get local taxis. That's also where we find the SASSA offices. That's where we find the largest police station and the magistrates' court. And also, we have a community library where the students and also the young people in the community use that for internet connection. And then by focusing on these two areas, we aim to leverage the existing infrastructure, high foot traffic and accessibility to facilitate to financial and social services to drive our digitization project and promote financial inclusion across Tembisa. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Kidumetso Malefe, born and raised in Hammanskraal. I'm a dedicated community coordinator who aims to provide excellent customer service, ensuring satisfaction by delivering accurate information and resolving issues promptly. I'm committed to teamwork, diversity, and inclusion. I'm responsible for tracking issues within the Hammanskraal community, which may be barriers to moving towards digitization, also assisting with the development of programs and the coordination of events. I also ensure that programs are diverse and fit various SMMEs and also individual consumer needs. Looking at the overview of Hammanskraal, in terms of demographics, we have approximately 123,000 people. It's a peri-urban settlement it also serves as an economic hub for surrounding rural areas. And also, Hammanskraal is also viewed as a trans-provincial region that functionally connects the 4 provinces, mainly the Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Gauteng. It is occupied mostly by Black South African residents and a growing migrant population. In terms of economic activity, it is centered on transport networks for buses and taxis. We also have shopping centers and mall complexes, and we also have formal and informal enterprises across a wide range of sectors. We have a mix of locally and migrant-owned businesses and access to all the 5 main FSPs. From a social infrastructure perspective, we have 1 government hospital, 8 government clinics, and also about 4 private clinics. And there are also private schools, about 6 of them within the nodes, and over 100 schools that are within the entire of Hammanskraal. We have 26 churches, 13 walls, and 11 recreational parks. Also, there is a SASSA office and 2 police stations and a traffic department. The challenges that we are facing is poverty and inequality, also not forgetting a high unemployment rate, crime rate, and low education rate. Also looking at the xenophobia in some areas with little or no integration between citizens and the foreign nationals. Now moving on to our economic notes, one which is Mandela Village. This is centered around the Hammanskraal station. We have the Kopanong bus stations as well as the Rainbow Taxi Rank, Kopanong and Rainbow shopping complexes, as well as the Mandela markets. We have about 4 petrol stations, a police station, and also recreational parks. This node also includes all formal and informal businesses across a different range of sectors, and there is also electricity and network coverage. We have branches, about 3 of them, which is Standard Bank, Capitec, and ABSA, and numerous ATMs. Then there is Timber City. Now this is an economic node along a vibrant street, which has a home affairs. We also have Moretele Magistrate Court, a timber taxi rank, a petrol station, not forgetting the 2 churches, 1 public clinic, and 2 private clinics. Now, there is also a high number of informal businesses across range of sectors. We have both the migrant-owned and the locally owned businesses within this node. There is also electricity and network coverage. FSPs, which includes branches like Capitec, Netbank, and FNB, and also the Netbank ATMs, FNB, Capitec, and Standard within this very same business street. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nombuso and Gidumezi, for giving us a rich snapshot of our communities that the project is piloting in. I'll hand over now to Jake and Sandisiwe, representing DFS Lab and Fin Property, and they will take us through our barriers and challenges that hinder the adoption of digital payments in Tembisa and Hammanskraal. Jake and Sandisiwe, over to you.
Great, thanks. Let me just get our slides up here, 1 second. Okay, can everyone see those?
Yeah, Jake.
That's great. That's great.
Yes, okay, I'll take that as a yes. Good. So thank you all for being here, and thanks especially to Finmark Trust and to the World Bank for sponsoring the work and bringing us into this great project. I want to start off just kind of giving you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to start off with a little bit of framing and understanding the methodology, the research that we did, and then of course we'll dive into the findings. Just so you know who we are, my name's Jake Kendall, and I'm the managing director and co-founder of the DFS Lab. And DFS Lab has got 2 primary lines of business. We have and run a venture capital firm where we invest all across Africa in companies that are building a digital economy for the continent. And then related to that, we do research and run innovation programs in that same area for some of the clients that you see over here on the left side. So the 2 parts of our work fit together really well in the sense that the research that we do help us understand the market, understand the opportunity, and guide some of our investing strategy. And what we learn as investors and as market participants feeds in and sharpens our research, especially in the area of understanding the private sector and how different kind of digital economy models can work. Now, this particular project, the goal here was really to give Finmark and the World Bank and the other partners a strong kind of underlying body of research and data to guide the project, right? And we wanted to find out basically, kind of what is the status digital payments in Tembisa and Hammanskraal, and then also what are kind of the barriers and opportunities to increase digitization of payments. And we had 4 primary activities in terms of our research approach. We started, of course, with kind of desk research and background research to understand the context. And then we had 3 different data collection exercises. So the first was a quantitative exercise mapping all of the stores and small enterprises within the townships and collecting data from them on their usage of payments and those kinds of variables. And then we also did qualitative structured interviews with consumers to understand their perceptions and usage of digital payments. And then finally, we talked to financial service providers to get their perspective. Here's the team quickly. We had a lot of people involved. Should point out Brand Fusion, that's Russell at the bottom. They were the ones doing the enterprise mapping. They were great partners in being able to do that mapping and collect really high quality data. And then Sandy Siwe, who was with me today, also qualitative research, which was quite excellent. I'm going to go through 3 different of the methodologies for these 3 different kind of data collection exercises we conducted. So first, I'll start here with kind of an overarching concept of how we conceived the whole thing, and how we kind of framed it to ourselves. So if you look over here on the right, we've got this kind of model of how supply and demand interact, wrapped around by kind of the supporting environment, the regulations, the infrastructure, all the things that kind of affect supply and demand. And so we wanted to kind of understand that as a system, not just not just as a point as part of the system, but as a dynamic living system. And so over here on the left, you can see we chose as the subjects of our research on the supply side the FSP providers. This is down along the bottom row. And then on the demand side, both consumers and sort of enterprises and merchants who are accepting payments within the township. So those are kind of the 3 different groups. And then the methods for the financial services providers, we went and had structured interviews with about 10 of them. For the consumers, Sandy Siwe is going to talk more about that work that she conducted, but it was a very structured set of interviews across sort of a balanced different groups from sort of old, young, rich, poor, etc. And the merchant survey, as I mentioned, was a quantitative survey guided by Brand Fusion. Now, just to go a little bit deeper on the merchant survey itself, and then Sandy Siwe is going to take over talking about the methodology behind the qualitative work. The quantitative survey was basically conducted across both of Tembisa and Hammanskraal with the goal of surveying every retail establishment, essentially. And we believe that we got probably 90% of them. Some of them are a bit hard to find or maybe have been missed, but we're pretty sure we got almost all of the retail establishments. So we really wanted to create a full picture of the landscape where payments are accepted and where cash can be taken in and out of the system, and how that can be leveraged as part of this project. And then when at each retail point, the Brand Fusion team would go in with a survey, they would capture some photos, they would capture the location, and then they would ask either the owner or the manager a series of questions about their usage of payments, their customers' perceptions of payments, their enablement, so things like internet, electricity, all those other kinds of things, and their own perceptions of payments. So it was a very kind of comprehensive survey. Sandy Siwe, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about your qualitative research?
Thanks so much. I hope everyone can hear me. So as Jake mentioned, this aspect of the research wanted to look at understanding the barriers, the opportunities for enhancing or improving the uptake of digital payments from a consumer perspective. Understanding consumer knowledge and perception, but also testing what are the drivers behind digital payments, and what are the drivers that limit people from using digital payments in both Tembisa and Hammanskraal. Some of the key questions we asked and we looked at is what and how and where digital payments used, what are the blockers and opportunities, and for those who are using digital payments, how far do they use them in their lives, versus withdrawing cash. We looked at 4 key groups across the 2 townships. So young versus old, banked versus unbanked, male versus female, SASSA versus non-SASSA. And the logic behind that was to try and see, are there key groups and personas where we can test differences in attitudes and perceptions towards digital payments. And with SASSA grant recipients was to look at, well, since they're receiving the grants digitally, how far do they transact and store their finances digitally? Does that impact their uptake of digital payments? We then conducted interviews with FSPs because we understood that we had a demand perspective from the enterprises and consumers, but we also wanted to hear from the FSPs to survey what are the key developments, what are the opportunities, but also what are the challenges from a supply side and FSP perspective. And these are the various FSPs that we interviewed. We met with MNOs, we met with fintechs, we met with retailers as well. In terms of the qualitative research findings in both Tembisa and Hammanskraal, these were the key characteristics. The vast majority of South African citizens, vast majority also have access to a mobile phone and access the internet on their phones. The majority were banked, and those who were unbanked, it was due to lack of documentation because they were foreign citizens. And for those who were unbanked, they engaged with digital payment methods such as e-wallet. And then for a minority, MTN Momo and VodaPay. And then the unbanked will also use ShopRite Money Market to receive funds or transact. There's a general awareness with digital payments and there's comfort, but this doesn't necessarily translate to usage or storing funds digitally. A minority were aware of and using their mobile phones or using MNO-based platforms. But once more, as we say, comfort and awareness doesn't necessarily translate to digital payment usage. I mean, for most unemployed and reliant on income from grants, and also reliant on income from family and friends for additional support. A lot were involved in economic activities in the informal economy and informal sector, and most receive income on an ad hoc basis. And what we also found is how people receive the money and the frequency of receiving funds will also in a way influence how they engage with digital payments and how they store their funds. So here are some supporting quotes concerning access and usage barriers for digital payments. By access barriers, we mean those barriers that limit their ability to access digital payments, and then usage barriers are those linked to barriers that limit their usage. So SASSA grant recipients prefer to withdraw all or most funds received as cash. Here's a quote from a grant recipient in Tembisa: "I withdraw the entire amount as it's not much money." And this was something that came through both in Tembisa and Hammanskraal, that they're aware that the funds they receive are not much. SASSA grant recipients withdraw all the cash as they fear government will take their funds. So we also see a quote here from Tembisa, from a grant recipient who says, "I withdraw all the money, and the reason is that people say if you keep it in the account, you might not receive payment in the following month." And this was also a general sentiment that was picked up, that you must withdraw all your funds or else you won't, the government will take it, or you won't receive the funds in the following month. And this potentially impacts how SASSA grant recipients engage with digital payments, or how they even perceive digital payments or storing money and value digitally. Preference for cash as a payment method came through quite strongly as well. Here we have a quote from a female grant recipient in Hammanskraal: "I prefer to buy with physical money because of the tangibility, because it's an easy concept. And cash is the primary payment method used, as individuals have to pay businesses in cash due to the fact that a lot of the businesses have limited digital payment capabilities. So this also came through in both Tembisa and Hammanskraal, that people have to withdraw cash so that they can pay the businesses in their communities in cash, because the businesses do not often have digital payment capabilities. Cash is easier to use. All shops take cash compared to the few that have card machines. This is from a male non-grant recipient in Tembisa. Another headline finding is that individuals will disqualify themselves from utilizing digital payments due to low incomes. I say, this is a quote from a male grant recipient in Tembisa, I will say I choose cash for now, as the amount we receive is too little to be using digital payments. So these are interesting barriers in that they also reinforce the point that even if people are aware and comfortable with digital payments, comfort and awareness are not enough. There are other factors and perceptions that need to be addressed. So when we put it all together, we found that there were key influencing factors with regards to payment methods. So we then looked at, okay, based on these key influencing factors, there are also potential potential intervention points where you can implement interventions that could increase the uptake of digital payments. So when we look at in-store purchases, as previously mentioned, most businesses in the community operate on a cash basis. And therefore, let me start with cash deposits and withdrawals. Recipients receive funds digitally, but they often have to withdraw the funds because if we look at the cycle, their purchases are mostly on a cash basis. And as previously mentioned, respondents indicated that a lot of the businesses in their communities have limited digital payment capabilities. Following that, because of that, they then have to retain cash as a store of value. They need to have cash in hand so that they can be able to transact in their communities. And then this in turn influences the storage of value, whether they store funds in cash or digitally. So how they get paid, we know that SASSA grant recipients are paid digitally, and some of the other recipients may be paid digitally. So sources of income, modes of receiving payments, and the cost of storing cash versus digital. This may influence, but we also found that, people are not necessarily too concerned with, they're aware of the expense of withdrawing cash. But the primary driver is I need to withdraw all my funds because government may take them, or I also need to withdraw all funds because the businesses in my community require paid cash, which then in turn influences the storage of value. And this is also influenced by preferences and experiences, digital payment literacy, financial needs, the payment methods used in their community, and even community feedback. So there were also stories of how they'd heard from friends in the community that the funds had been taken digitally. Digital is not necessarily safe. And these and other factors will impact whether individuals store their funds in cash or digitally. And then, as we've mentioned, the purchases, cash in versus cash out. And just to expand on that. So also use the cost of utilizing the payment method. Individuals mentioned that when they swipe in their communities at spaza stores or smaller stores in their communities, they have to pay 10 Rand per 100 Rand that they transact. Proximity is also quite important, although individuals are also willing to travel to withdraw their funds. Value-added services and other auxiliary services will influence how individuals purchase and use funds digitally versus cash. Thank you.
Thank you, Sendisiwe. I'm gonna unless we're gonna stop for questions, and I think I'll just jump straight into the quantified research as well. So this was the data that we collected from the shop owners in person. And I'm just going to walk you through a couple of the most important findings. There was a lot of data collected, and so it's kind of impossible to show all of it today, but we have shared, of course, with Finmark Trust, and hopefully they'll be able to put it out as a publication later. But yeah, so just to so sort of give you some of the headlines. The landscape is, maybe not surprisingly, dominated by smaller, more informal retailers, most of whom have smartphones, but not sort of POS or cash registers and things like that. About a third are female-owned, a third are young. So here's kind of some data on the stores and their level of readiness is one way we thought about it for digital payments. So if they're registered, of course, it makes it easier to get a bank account and those kinds of things. If they have electricity, then they can run the different digital devices that might be necessary. Smartphones, of course, can be used for payments. Cash registers. So if you look just across here, I think, the good news is that they're relatively highly electrified and almost entirely, owning smartphones. But then some of the other enabling elements, being registered, having a cash register or computer, a POS device, were a lot lower in terms of people's ability or stores' ability to engage in digital payments. And then similarly, having a bank account is kind of a critical element in being able to do digital payments. And you see, in particular, this pattern was quite strong. Owner-run, sort of one-person businesses, much less in terms of how many of them had bank accounts. Basically, the norm would be not to have one. Slightly bigger businesses where there's a few employees, was about 50-50, and then larger businesses, almost entirely, most of them had business bank accounts. So big difference across the spectrum in terms of the size of the business, which often then correlated with how formal they were and a number of other things as well that we found related to digital payments. About half of the enterprises did not accept digital payments at all, therefore transacting entirely in cash. Preferences of their customers and the cost of conducting digital payments were two of the key barriers, but then there were other barriers as well. And we did see that some merchants, most merchants kind of understood some of the benefits of digital payments, including that cash might have its own downsides in terms of safety and that kind of thing. So, here's the data on which of the enterprises use different kinds of payments, and you can see over half do only cash, and then the rest of the 49% take a variety of different digital payment options, bank transfer being the most popular, and cards, but then some doing QR, salsa cards, and others. So lots of room to improve. I guess would be the picture there. Here were people's stated reasons for not adopting digital payments, and you can see that cost and customer preference, customers stating that they prefer to use cash were big. Fraud concerns and a few other things like that weren't so big. And then the other category was a set of kind of more vague responses, people just saying, I don't really like it, or I don't really understand it. A little bit harder for us to unpack, but sort of a general uneasiness or unfamiliarity, basically. In addition to how they're paid by their customers, we also asked them how they make their own payments, the different enterprises and merchants. And we found that most of them, probably not surprisingly, also were paying in cash, right? They were paying employees and suppliers. And you can see here, a large number of the enterprises over on the left side, 58% were paying cash only. And you can imagine that these things are all related, right? If they're getting paid in cash, it's probably easier for them to pay their suppliers and employees in cash. So we wanted to track kind of that whole cycle from how they get the cash into the business and how it comes out the other side. And then the other thing to note is that we broke it down by the two different, across the two different townships, and there was quite a bit of difference. A lot more cash payments in Tembisa, whereas in Hammanskraal there was a lot more bank transfers when paying suppliers. And it seemed to be, in general, Tembisa was a bit more informal, smaller businesses, and also a lot more of the business owners were not South African, so they maybe didn't have all the documentation to get a bank account, that kind of thing. So similarly, in paying employees in cash, actually it's even more prevalent. I think employees prefer to be paid in cash in a lot of cases, and so Again, we see that most of the businesses almost entirely were paying in cash, and then a few were using bank transfers. Almost none of the other payment methods were being used very much. So we asked people about their understanding of the benefits of digital payments, and generally there was a lot of understanding. Most of the businesses expressed some interest or curiosity about adopting them, and felt like there was benefits. But then there were big differences across some of these enablement factors in terms of how many had actually gone beyond expressing interest to adopting and to using digital payments, electronic payments. So you can see, non-registered businesses, quite a bit less, quite a bit more, a larger number of them accepted cash only and didn't use digital payments. Similarly with, businesses that didn't have electricity or didn't have a POS. And then even with smartphones, didn't have a smartphone, a lot more cash based, but that's a very small population. So it's not easy to draw a lot of insight from that. Then we broke it down by the type of business and, reasonable level of correlation there. Of course, financial service providers, funeral homes, they tended to be the highest users of digital payments. Makes sense, certainly for financial service providers. And I think funeral homes, doing a lot of financial services often on the side as well, and managing larger amounts of money. Then you can see some of the other correlations going down here to the very bottom, where we have some open market traders, tabletop sellers, which we also surveyed as part of this. We didn't just stick with folks that have an actual building as a store, and that group, is not surprising, was almost entirely cash based. So you see a lot of difference in terms of what kind of industry or sector they're in. And then lastly, on the quantitative data, this is a box plot of how much income we projected the store had. And we had, of course, most of the stores tell us directly. We didn't ask them how much income, but we could sort of impute it from footfall and the size of the basket that people were buying. And maybe not surprisingly, the stores with more turnover and footfall were doing a lot more digital payments. So that's the quantitative data. I'm going to then quickly go through the financial service provider interviews, as I think we're running a little bit short on time. So I'll just jump right in, I guess. I think we interviewed the financial service providers across, the 10 different companies that Sandy Siwe showed earlier. And what we found were kind of 3 different models for how they were using digital and how they were sort of applying digital to sort of bring their customers into a more digital payments and using more digital financial products. So the first one we called the ecosystem integration model. And that's one where they were trying to create a set of products and features within kind of a closed loop ecosystem, where the payments between the different elements of the service would be instantaneous and settle immediately, and it would all be sort of branded with their internal brand. In contrast to that, if you go down to the bottom, the value-added services model was one where there was a lot less, sort of effort put into making everything seamless, and they would sort of aggregate a lot of different services, whether it be airtime purchase, utilities, having a wallet, merchant payments, all those kind of things, all would be kind of integrated together, but might be branded differently because they were coming from different kind of third-party service providers and that kind of thing. And then the hybrid kiosk model was one that was more focused on distribution, and was where mostly banks, if you look on the First National Bank, Nedbank, and Time Bank, were kind of ones we categorize as having this model. And so they were often using partnerships or some other form of kiosk model so that they could get out of their sort of more heavy bank-based infrastructure and leverage the infrastructure of partners to expand their ability to attract new customers. And so all 3 of these models have some combination of trying to expand distribution while also trying to boost revenue through new types of features and products that would give people more reasons to pay and use things in digital form. The kiosk model is much more biased towards distribution, whereas the other 2 are more towards adding more products and features and things that people can pay for and give them value in their day-to-day life. And maybe a final thing to say is, I think the ecosystem integration model, you could think of it as a little bit like Apple. Everything kind of smooth, fits together, kind of all the complexity is masked from you as the user, whereas the value-added services model is a little bit more like Android, a little bit more noisy, or a lot of other third-party apps and things like that. And the ecosystem integration model tended to be more launched by kind of more startup-y, shop-to-shop and A2Pay companies, where they're looking for higher margin, maybe a little bit slower development time, but maybe more sticky once they do develop their product. And then the value-added services model were a little bit lower margin, faster to launch, and maybe a better fit for bigger companies, MTN, Pick and Pay, Vodacom, etc., where they want to launch and get these services out to their large existing customer bases as soon as they can, even if the margins are not as high. So those are kind of the three models that we found. One of the things that we did as well is try to break down the different strategies for launching those models and getting them into consumers' hands and kind of changing consumer behavior, in terms of moving people into more paying with digital, and getting them away from cash, helping them to kind of adopt and move into the more digital model that the company was launching. And so we sort of categorized it across these 5 different columns. I'm going to go through them quickly and maybe not spend a lot of time here since I know I'm running out of time. But first you had kind of immediate payment and settlement. So there was one area where the faster you can get things to settle and pay and sort of show people that transaction's complete and they have the money in their account. That was one approach to really helping people see the value of digital. Strategic partnerships with government or larger other brands that were trusted. That was another area, and some of the companies would, for example, partner with a large beer brand or a brand that was known to customers, or a use case that they were used to in their day-to-day life, and use that as a way to introduce payments to them in a trusted context. Community engagement. Some the companies were engaging directly with local community to make sure they're getting the feedback and understanding the needs of the clients and building that into new iterations of the product. We talked a little bit already about the hybrid physical digital touch points, so using kiosks and other kind of hybrid physical points where people can come in and feel they can actually talk to a person and that kind of thing to either adopt or get help with the product. And then more kind of education programs in terms of digital literacy. And I think where we saw more success, we didn't see a lot of success in the kind of education programs. A lot of companies had tried them and didn't feel like they were super strong in terms of the ability to change people's behavior or overcome doubts or trust issues with digital. And similarly with government, we didn't see a lot of strong partnerships with government as well. Although in other markets, where we've seen government come in strongly, we do think that model can work very well. So I know there's a lot on this slide, and I know we're going to share the slides after, so I'm not going to go into each point here. I think maybe the only idea is here that we took those 5 pillars and looked at how they played off differently across each of these 3 different models. And this slide summarizes that. But because we're running out of time a little bit, and I don't want to crowd anyone else out, I'm just going to jump through to the end. So thank you, everybody. If there's any questions, feel free. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to whoever's coming after me.
Very much, Jake and Sandisiwe, for helping us understand the hindrances to the adoption of digital payments in Tembisa and Hammanskraal. I will now hand over to Lesego Mashego from Finmark Trust, who will take us through the interventions aimed at improving digital payments to help us think about some solutions to these hindrances. Over to you, Lesego.
Thank you, Akona. Jake and Sandisiwe, thank you for taking us through that, because it makes my work very easy to go through. So in terms of the interventions, I think it's important that I preface what we had to do. So we had to make sure that we unpacked what Jake and Sandisiwe and their team found. And then in addition to that, we did additional qualitative assessments with the enterprises in the 2 economic nodes. As Nombuso and Kitumetse have indicated, we have nodes, and that's only because as an organization, as well as our partners, we're using this project to learn. And we're not going to be able to learn if we try and intervene in the entire Hammanskraal and the entire Tembisa, which means we needed to identify areas that mimic what an average consumer would be required to do on a day-to-day basis. So I, Lesego, go into Tembisa. I want to do my hair. I need to be able to find an enterprise in that node that would enable me to do my hair. I want to pay for taxi fare, or I want to go to work, which means I would need public transport, and I would need to pay for that. So the nodes, the interventions are meant to be implemented in the nodes. As Mark indicated, those interventions are not being implemented in perpetuity. We will pause, assess the impact of what we have done, and then based on that, we may need to adjust or continue with that particular intervention. So as you heard, Jake and Sandisiwa, I think they outlined key barriers, hindrances that are stopping people in these communities from using digital payments, and we had to group them so that we're able to understand them a bit better. And from that grouping, what we were able to identify is that there's a trust deficit in the 2 communities. There's limited knowledge on the financial service products, but also how you're able to use them. Access is an issue both from a consumer perspective where they want to go and make digital payments, but also from an enterprise perspective, because then they don't have access to this POS device that they need. Awareness, as Jake indicated, they seem to be aware, they understand, but then it depends on the level of the business that you're engaging with. Account ownership, both Nombuso and Kitumetse indicated that they have a growing migrant population, and I think we said upfront that account ownership is good for South Africans, but for businesses that operate in South Africa and are migrants, unfortunately, it's not the case for them. Perceptions that come up on what happens to my money, particularly for grant recipients. And then I think it's important for us to highlight the cost issue, right? So the cost issue comes up in different ways. From a consumer perspective, it's the fact that they don't want to pay the extra 10% that's charged to them by the enterprise, and the enterprise does this because they too don't understand what is the cost that they need to pay for them to be able to do this service. So from that, we were then able to come up with a number of interventions. I'm using a computer that's not mine, and I'm struggling to find stuff, but I found it. So the first one, and I know, Jake, you said digital literacy, financial literacy hasn't worked, but we thought it's important for us to first, before we try and do anything, to educate the people that we're trying to include from a digital payments perspective. So for us, it's important that you make sure that that particular education literacy that you provide is targeted and it's structured for that particular target audience. We've broken it down into 3 target groups, being the SASSA grant recipient. There's a specific reason why we have isolated the SASSA grant recipient from all other consumers, and that's particularly because, as Sandisiwa was speaking, I think she mentioned that government is going to take my money. And unfortunately, we're not able to address that without including SASSA, which means it's important for us to make sure that we reassure grant recipients that SASSA does not take back their money. When their money is in their account, it belongs to them. But also then cover the general financial and digital literacy, and then the advantages of using the store value as well as digital payments, the benefits of digital payments. For all consumers, it will be similar to the SASSA grant recipients, except the only thing is that we would not cover the non-flow back perception that SASSA grant recipients have. And then enterprises, obviously, because yes, they will need general financial and digital literacy. For them, it's expanding it and understanding the advantage of using an account, the benefits of digital payments for them from an enterprise's perspective, but also the benefits of them paying their suppliers as well as the people that work for them digitally, but also what is available and could be useful for them. So we're trying to get them to take advantage of what digital payments can do for their businesses. Why we picked this particular intervention? We want to do this because it's important for us to address the trust issue that we find in these communities, the knowledge and financial and digital literacy capability that we find, but also the cost and value of digital payments. So the structure and whatever that we're going to communicate in these education seminars or whatever that we do would then need to cover these three main elements because it's important that these are addressed up front. Our target groups would be society at large, the SASSA grant recipients, consumers, and enterprises. Again, we say we separate them so they're not a community at large because we need to make sure that we address an enterprise where an enterprise is comfortable. So there's no way that we're going to be able to say to an enterprise, leave your business, I want to take you on an education training. It means we need to tailor make it and make sure that we deliver it where the enterprise is comfortable. So those would be the targeted audience and the material will be targeted in that manner. So the intervention design for us will look at targeted training, as I've indicated, and then make sure that we do ongoing training. So I think in many instances, we assume that we can come in today, train you, you're going to remember everything for the rest of your life, and you're not gonna forget anything, and you're not gonna need a refresher. But we have the two community coordinators to assist us so that we're able to check on you and see whether things are still going well. If there's anything else you need us to explain, and we will then make sure that we continue to do ongoing training if it is required. Our second intervention is what we call community mobilization. So that's basically us now getting the community on board, getting them to understand what it is that we're trying to do, making sure that we build acceptance of the value of digital payments. And this we're not able to do alone, right? I hope you all know that Finmark Trust and the World Bank and all our partners are not FSPs, which means we do not have any solutions that we're able to provide. Therefore, we will rely on FSPs that are there by encouraging them to promote their offerings, obviously responsibly and understandably. And also we will then also support that by running generic non-branded campaigns on an ongoing basis. We will also promote existing digital payment solution and usage. So I call this influencing the influencer of the community. And that's working with specific people in these communities that communities trust. So in most instances, we say that there's payments everywhere and people are able to use them, but people generally want to trust the organization that they're using a digital payment with. I think Sandisi were highlighted that there were issues in terms of what community members share with each other. But where you go to organizations that they trust, like faith-based organizations, as well as where people make recurring payments like schools, etc., it might be an environment where they then start trusting the process. Again, like we said, we're testing all of these things out with the intention that we will then make sure that we onboard as many consumers in Tembisa and Hammanskraal as possible. I think it's important that we also make sure that payments of public utilities, especially those that are recurring, are part of what people are able to pay digitally. We'll also promote some of the new as well as the established payment solutions that are there, like the pay shops of this world. I think Jake mentioned in his presentation that a lot of the things that the enterprises will say is that I want my money now, I need to use it now, so I don't want it to reflect tomorrow. And there's innovation already in the payment system that's there, but unfortunately when you do go to speak to people in Tembisa and Hammanskraal, they know nothing about some of these innovative products that are there. And then making sure that we promote the use of digital payments by suppliers of goods and services. So in the qualitative that we did, what we found as well is that a lot of the suppliers that supply these enterprises, unfortunately, will ask for cash. We're not sure why. We're still investigating the reasons why. So it's important that we get them on board so that they accept digital payments from the enterprises, because if they don't, the enterprise will also most likely want to use cash because they then need cash to pay for their supplies. Why we're doing this, again, it's to address the trust issue, the knowledge and capability issue, as well as digital spending. And then our target groups will be society at large, but we'll also focus on schools, faith-based organizations, and then large retail stores. So a lot of the people in these communities will go to large retail stores and they're comfortable with going to a Pick and Pay and a Checkers, etc. Which means you want to make sure that whatever that you're driving from a mobilization perspective, they see it in these stores, and it's not only in isolation to the smaller enterprises that are there. Our design for this particular one will be general awareness, and then making sure that we have targeted interventions with defined groups such as your community schools and faith-based organizations. I'm not sure if everyone can see my slides. I'm seeing something different.
I've shared.
Okay. And then in terms of the intervention 3, this is enterprises' access to digital payment solutions. Like I said initially, for us as an organization, we don't provide solutions, which means we need to rely on FSPs. And I'm hoping that there are FSPs online. So the intention here is really for us to mobilize FSPs to provide digital payment solutions in the pilot sites, but also facilitate customer support from the FSPs. So a lot of the insights that we got when we were doing the qualitative is that as much as I have this particular device, I'm not able to use it because I struggle with certain things, and when I try to call the call center, I'm not able to get access to a person that will be able to help me. A key thing also, and I think this is something that Jake highlighted that has worked in different countries, is making sure that although we have these POS devices or whatever solution that is available, try get that to also include value-added services as an additional incentive, because we found that for those particular POS devices where a person is able to make an income from airtime, etc., they actually promoted more than those that do not have value-added services. Why we're doing this? It's to make sure that we provide access, but also address the cost issue. But also in addition to that, to make sure that there are digital solutions support in those particular communities. Our target group for this particular intervention are the enterprises only. An intervention designed for us is making sure that we engage with the FSP stakeholders to establish a coalition of the willing, so those that are willing to participate, to join us to roll out this particular intervention. To encourage FSPs to also run communication and awareness campaigns in collaboration with us. You will see that in some instances, as I speak, some of the interventions speak to each other, and we'll make sure that when we do roll them out, we roll them out simultaneously. And then FSPs are also encouraged to then activate a customer support drive. Our 4th intervention, it's looking at the basic transport payments. So together with stakeholders, investigate how basic digital payments can be incorporated into the transport industry. Our focus for this particular one is the taxi industry. You're going to ask why, because Nombuso and Kitumetse highlighted that they have bus services as well, but the majority of the people in Tembisa and Hammanskraal use taxis more than buses, so our focus will be on the taxis. And obviously, like we've said, we will test, learn, and where possible, then expand into other areas. But our main focus will start with the taxi industry. And maybe you ask, so why don't you just roll out solutions like we said in intervention 3? We can't for this particular one because we think it's important that we understand. So the little that we know is that there are there are implications on what we bring on board, and we need to make sure that whatever that we do is practical. But we also need to make sure that the driver, the consumer, as well as the owner of the taxi are comfortable in whatever that we bring on board. So in townships generally, so where you do find taxis, is that you will find that they are within an association, but they also do different services. So some of them will focus on scholar transport, and that payment looks different to a person that does local payments or local taxi commuting. That person will require a different payment solution, because they may then need to make sure that they have cash on hand or some form of a tool to transfer to the person that they transferring some of their commuters to, etc. So we think that it's important for us to make sure that we engage first, come up with what a solution could look like for each of the type of services that are provided by taxis. And then once decided, we will then engage with FSPs, fintechs, to provide an agreed service as communicated. What are we addressing? The digital solution as well as the support thereof, and then making sure that there's digital spending in the community, particularly within the taxi industry. Target group, taxi industry in its entirety, so the associations, the owners, the drivers. And then in terms of intervention design, we'll focus on determining the easiest and most impactful point of entry for digital payments. We're not going to be able to solve the whole value system. We understand that, but we will look at what is feasible currently, and then make sure that we work with FSPs and fintechs to actualize whatever that we have. And then our fifth intervention is in community support. I think we've been saying over and over again, people have this particular device, they're not able to use it, they call a call center, they don't know what to do thereafter, and they stop. And we think it's important that people in these particular communities have someone that they trust, that they're able to speak to when there are issues. In the short term, it may be physical points of access that are required so that this person is there. And the intention is really for us to make sure that there is an interaction between the FSPs as well as a person. So this person will act as an informed conduit to the FSPs. They need not represent the FSPs individually, but will facilitate interactions regarding operational issues, queries, complaints, and route these and manage and provide feedback on these to the consumers in Tembisa and Hammanskraal. In the short term, we think that the pilot will likely absorb this particular cost. But like we said, because this is a proof of concept, in the long run, we will then need to think about who else is able to provide this service, and how do the FSPs possibly come through to fund such a community support service. What we're trying to address here is, again, the trust issue. So if I have my card and I try to use it and then I can't because I've lost my PIN, and then I can't get through to the call center, over time I may think that there are issues with the FSP that I am affiliated with, and we don't want that. So we want to make sure that people are comfortable and trust whatever that they're doing. Again, it's to make sure that we provide the appropriate digital solutions and the support thereof. The target group for this particular intervention is all the community members. And then in terms of intervention design, it's to make sure that we establish a human interface in communities. I know then someone asked me that we're all moving to a digital world, but we can see that even to the extent that there is infrastructure in Hammanskraal and Tembisa, unfortunately the people that reside in these localities don't move at the pace that we move in. And we want to test that when there is a human interface, what happens. It might be that we're not seeing the truth, and when we assess the impact, we will say that this does not work. Actually, we were wrong. But for now, we think that it's important that people interact. The intention of this is, in terms of the design, they will be there to provide dispute management and support, but also to provide operational support on a basic level, like basics, the things that you need when you need to use your digital tools. Our last intervention will be focusing on regulatory work streams. So this is really for us to make sure that as we roll out the different interventions and as we pick up any regulatory issues that should be provided, we then address them. And these could span different areas. For now, what we've picked up is that there are specific regulatory issues, like issues such as migrants that are not able to access bank accounts, and when you need a bank account for you to be able to get to a point of sale device. Issues such as interoperability of payment instruments, so where a participant will say to us, I use cash send, but I'm not able to extract it from another ATM. So those are some of the things that we need to look at. From a cost perspective, I think, as I've mentioned, consumers don't understand the cost, but also we are not sure what the cost drivers are, and I think it's only when you are certain of what informs the cost that the enterprise has to pay for a device as well as that is transactions, then you're able to inform the enterprise a bit better on what it is that they need to do, or we're able to have conversations amongst ourselves as regulators, FSPs and policymakers on how do we address this cost issue if it is possible. And then focusing on issues from an informal enterprise perspective where they are unable to basically use the NPS as an enterprise because of the level of informality, so they remain an individual because they're not a business. Those are, for this particular intervention, we will be addressing the account ownership issue, particularly for migrants. I think we picked up that it's not an issue for South African, but it is for migrant business owners that we find in these communities, as well as the cost and value for digital payments. Target group, it's all, and then we will set up work streams with key stakeholders to address these challenges and barriers hindering the use of acceptance of digital payments in these 2 townships. Thank you. Akon is meant to introduce me again. I know you guys have the agenda in front of you, so I'm not gonna make her introduce me again to make sure that we save on time as well. So in terms of next steps, as you heard, a lot of these interventions cannot be done in isolation, which means we need to collaborate, as Brandon has indicated, that for us, this project is meant to bring together donors, like we have a partnership with the World Bank, as well as the Swiss, policymakers, regulators, FSPs, the cities. So some of the things that we picked up, City of Ekurhuleni and City of Tshwane, we're not gonna be able to address them without you being there. The community at large, right? So we have Nombuso and Gitumetse, but they're just 2. So there's a community at large in Tembisa and Hammanskraal, and you need to make sure that you bring them on board. So our next steps is to make sure that we continue to collaborate, to engage in these communities, but also engage with yourselves that are online, and engage with the FSPs and the regulators so that we can see areas where you would like to participate, particularly with the interventions that we've highlighted. But I think a key thing is that what are we then able to extract over the next few years? As Brandon has indicated, we'll be doing this in the next 2 to 3 years. And we don't think that because this project is a proof of concept, we don't believe that we would do a proof of concept by not learning and sharing those insights. So we will engage further through other webinars. I think those ones it won't be a one-way engagement where we speak to you and you're not able to talk to us back. We will make sure that we have conversations with you, because at that time we will be learning from implementing the different interventions in those particular localities. So in terms of where you can find us, as you can see, we have Nombuso Kwamanda. So Nombuso is based in Tembisa. Her email address is in the slides, and then Gitumetse as well. You can also visit our webpage, Community Digitalization webpage, or contact myself. I'm sure all of you have my email addresses, or you can find it somewhere, or info@finmarktrust. Then this is really opening ourselves up to you, because we said we wanted to engage, we said we wanted to speak to you, but we want to collaborate with you, and we're not going to be able to do that without engaging with you further. Without you coming to us, best believe we will come to you. We intend on setting up a number of engagement sessions, particularly with the FSPs, because between myself and Mark, we're not able to implement anything, and between myself and Peter, we're not able to implement anything either without the FSPs being involved. So we will make sure that we engage with the various FSPs in our country to make sure that we make this thing work. The intention really is for us to, once it works for Tembisa and Hammanskraal, hopefully another rural site or two, when we can see that it works from that perspective, it's easier for us to say that we've proved what works, and we're then able to feed back to the authorities, the regulators, the policymakers to say, if you want to drive digital payments in South Africa, these are the things that you're going to have to consider, and this is how you should do that. With that said, I'd like to thank everyone that has been involved. So to the team at DFS Lab, we wouldn't have been able to do this without you. So the walkabouts that you had to do, thank you. You've made our work a bit easier, and it will be easier for us to continue to do what we need to do in Tembisa and Hammanskraal because of the insights that you've collected. I'd also like to thank the Swiss for giving us the funding that has enabled us to do the work that we do, as well as our World Bank partners who not only provided the funding that allows us to do what we do, but are also our partners in crime, and they go to field with us. And they do all of these interventions with us, and we sit and we fight and we come up with what are the issues, and then we then come up and say, this is what we're going to do in these two particular environments. And to all of you that will collaborate with us, my team and I will forever be thankful for you offering to collaborate with us, because it's only through what you're able to do that we would then be able to implement this particular project. With that said, I can see it's 14:34. Apologies for taking 4 minutes of your time. I'm going to hand over to Akona to say goodbye as the MC, and thank you so much for joining us. I can see there's a lot of questions in the tray. Akona will guide you on what we're going to do with those questions if they have not been responded to. Thank you. Akona.
Thank you very much, Lesotho. Colleagues on the call, thank you very much for engaging with us this afternoon. We really appreciate your insights, especially on the comment section, so we'll make sure that we address those as we disseminate the various presentations that were shared today. With that, I'll sign off. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.